Hi, I'm Greg Dell with Attorneys Dell and Schaefer, and I want to talk about the difference between total disability versus residual disability benefits. Now, first thing that's most important to know is that you may have a policy that doesn't necessarily even have residual disability benefits, and the easy way to think about residual disability benefits is that it's basically like working part-time. That's the simplest way before we get into it, whereas total disability means that you're unable to perform the duties of your occupation and you're basically not working at all. Now, there are policies that allow you to work in another occupation if you're totally disabled, but most of the disability policies out there say that total disability is unable to perform the material duties of your occupation. And as long as you can't do the duties of that particular occupation that you were performing before you became disabled, then you're totally disabled. Now, it may be possible for you to go on to another type of occupation and still collect your total disability benefits, but that will depend on the language of your policy, and I highly encourage you that if you want to know your options, to contact us, let us review your policy complimentary, and let you know what we think about what you can or cannot do under your policy. And that goes for whether you're seeking total, residual, or for that matter, whatever your question is about your disability policy. But for purposes of this video, I want you to have this basis of what residual disability is and what total is, because you may be saying, what are my options, or should I buy residual disability if you're even looking into a long-term disability policy? So residual disability, also kind of known as part-time disability, is defined differently in many of the long-term disability policies, because long-term disability policies are not government per se regulated language that they have to follow. Certainly disability policies have to be approved by the Department of Insurance in each state, but disability companies can write them however they want. And residual disability is usually defined as the inability to perform one or more of the duties of your occupation, and you have a loss of income of at least 20% of what you were earning pre-disability. Another portion of this definition that often happens, and it's a different type of residual definition, is unable to perform one or more of the duties of your occupation, or unable to perform the duties for as much time as you were performing before. And the as much time reduction means that if you were working 5 days a week and go down to 4 days a week, then you would satisfy that component of the definition of residual, but you still always have to have this loss of income. There's very often situations where people cut back and they may not necessarily have a reduction in income because they either have other people that pick up the slack for their work and you're still not getting a reduction in income, or you have an employer who's accommodating you and they say, yes, you can work reduced and we're still going to pay you the same. So even though you're struggling at work and you've changed your duties or you've reduced the amount of duties you're doing, if you don't have a reduction in income, you will never have a residual disability claim. So that's the easiest part of it. Where it starts to get into more opportunities, and I like to call them opportunities because residual disability as compared to total disability gives you a lot of options. Total disability is usually an all or none. Either you can do the duties of your occupation or you can't. And when you're totally disabled, you take the route of saying, I'm done, I'm not going back to that occupation at all. But when you're residually disabled, I always tell claimants that I think that one is a lot easier to get approved and a lot easier to stay on that particular type of definition, because you're basically telling the disability company, look, I can do some of my duties, I can't do all of them, or I can't do it for as much time as I did before. And it's a lot easier to tell someone I can do something part-time than I can't do it at all. Also, I often recommend claimants, if you can, look, a lot of claimants don't want to give up their job. Nobody wants to go on disability because often you're taking a significant monthly income reduction, because most disability benefits only pay 60% of what you were earning before. So I always tell claimants, look, if you can go on residual disability first, try to work through what's going on. See if cutting back eliminates the pain or the discomfort that you're having, makes it where you can still do your job. Then you can continue to work and collect the residual disability benefits. Now, in some scenarios, and in almost every residual disability policy, if you have greater than often a 75% or 80% loss of income, and again, it depends on what your policy says, then you can collect your entire total disability benefit amount, meaning the full benefit amount that's available. So to keep it easy, if you were making $100 a week and now you go down to anything below $20 a week, you're going to collect any amount under $20 a week plus your full disability benefit. So in some scenarios, you can continue to work on a limited basis, get your full disability benefit, and be making the same amount of money that you were making before. And that's really the whole point of a residual disability benefit, is to try to keep you working and get you whole to make the amount of money you were making before. Now, calculating residual disability, we talked about how pre-disability earnings, you have to have at least a 20%, or some policies say a 15% loss of your pre-disability earnings. Pre-disability earnings is going to be a defined term in your policy, and it's different from every carrier. Some companies say we're going to look at the exact 12 months from the date before you stopped working. Some say we're going to look at the calendar year before you stopped working. So if you stopped working in 2021, they're going to look at the average income you had in 2020. Some say we're going to look at the average of the 2 best consecutive years that you had over a 5-year period. So there's all different ways to calculate residual disability. But you must be cognizant and aware of what the calculation is of pre-disability earnings, because let's say, for example, you have one of those policies that says we're going to look at your pre-disability earnings from the calendar year before, and now it's December of 2020, for example, and you're thinking, I want to file for disability, and you maybe didn't have a great 2020 type year. You want to really make sure that you set a date of disability in 2020 if your pre-disability earnings is going to look at the year 2019. If you were to wait until January of 2021 or sometime in 2021 to file your residual, to claim a date of disability in 2021, and you weren't happy with the 2020 production because you were suffering during that period of time, or for whatever reason had a reduction in income, it's going to make it harder for you to maximize your residual disability benefits in the future. And to, again, break it down for you with residual disability, how it works. You take your pre-disability earnings. So let's say you were a person who was making $100,000, and now you continue to work and you make half of what you were making. So you go from, let's say, $10,000 a month to $5,000 a month. What the disability carrier is going to do is they're going to say, look, we see that you were previously making $10,000, now you're reporting $5,000, you have a 50% loss of income, we're going to pay you 50% of your monthly benefit. And if you have a 40% loss of income, then they're going to pay you 40% of your benefit. And that's the way that they calculate the benefit moving forward. Again, if you get to greater than a 75%, so if you had $10,000 a month and you go below $2,500 a month, then you're going to get your full benefit. And I know it may be a little confusing for you the way I'm talking about it, but you have to dial in what your pre-disability earnings are, and then you have to compare that to what your earnings are on a monthly basis. And it's a month-to-month calculation as you go forward. So if one month you have, say, $7,000 and you only have a 30% loss, and then the next month you have $2,000 because your income is generated based upon however the profits are of that particular month, then every month they're going to calculate your benefit differently. Then every month you need to send in what either your income is through a W-2. If you're a business owner, you're going to have to send in a P&L. You're going to have to show them possibly your pay stubs every month. And so it's a constant requirement of paperwork that the disability insurance carrier is going to require on a monthly basis. But residual disability, if you are considering buying a policy, is an option that you should absolutely exercise. Most policies come with it, and they call it, like I said earlier, either a partial disability, or if you have a group policy, some of them call it like a return to work provision, or they'll have language in your policy that just says working while disabled. And sometimes the residual definition will change. Like usually they'll say for the first 6 months of residual disability, no matter how much loss of income you have, they're going to pay you at least 50% of your residual disability benefit. So if you only have a 30% loss of income in the first 6 months, they'll pay you at least 50%. Now, some policies will look at your residual, take the residual disability that you have, and take the income that you're continuing to earn from your practice. And if the amount that you're being paid from your disability company and the amount of income you have exceeds more than what you were earning before, then they're going to deduct the additional money from what the disability company wants to pay you. It's not a scenario that happens often, but it's something that you need to be aware of. The other thing that's super critical in residual disability, some group disability policies say that if you make more than 80% of what you were making pre-disability, then your policy terminates. And you have to be super careful with that, because too many times we've seen someone who doesn't necessarily, it's usually people who are in their own business and they're going for 3 or 4 months, they don't get a paycheck, and then they take a paycheck in a particular month. And that amount of money exceeds what their pre-disability monthly earnings was. And when that happens, the carrier says, look, you made more than 80% of what you were earning. The policy language says this policy ends if you make more than 80%. And it's very, very hard to undo, because it's a technicality of when the money comes in, and the disability carriers don't necessarily have to average it over the last couple months. So there are very serious mistakes that can be made that can be catastrophic and end your policy. So you have to be very careful in how much income you earn and when you receive the income in order to maximize and continue your benefits. The other real strong benefit of residual disability is that, like most claimants, you don't want to give up your job, and it gives you the opportunity to try to work, see what you can continue to do, and at least you can say to the company, look, I didn't just call it quits right away and say I want total disability. I tried to work through it, I cut back, I did all of this extensive medical treatment, and I couldn't do it anymore. And now I'm ready to seek total disability. And since the chances of getting approved for residual disability are a lot easier than total disability, a lot of claimants like to minimize their risk moving forward and say, I want to get on residual disability, know that the disability company is paying me, and then I'll think about, can I really continue to do this? How bad am I suffering? Do I need to go on total disability? So what we would really like to do is discuss all of your options with you. I encourage you to reach out to myself or any of our disability lawyers. We're available to represent you anywhere in the country, no matter where you live. We always offer a free initial consultation, so we'll review your policy, we'll review whatever documents you have at this particular stage of your claim, whether you're applying or you've been denied, or you're just on claim and you want help with the claim. We help at all different levels of the claim, and we have experience with every single disability company. I encourage you to take some time, look through our website, look up your disability company, look up your medical condition, look up your occupation. You're going to see lots of articles, lots of questions and answers, lots of videos that we've done. Welcome you to subscribe, and would really appreciate you subscribing to our YouTube channel, where we put these videos out on a weekly basis. And the reason we do these videos is we want you to be educated about the disability claim process and what to expect with your claim. And the better educated you are, the better position you're going to be in to prevent a claim denial down the road. It's all about protecting your benefits, and that's the goal and the service that we provide. Should you need us in the future, we look forward to the opportunity to help you.